Saikia sir, faculty members, and participants from across the state. I, on behalf of the organizing committee, welcome you all to the one-week faculty development program on research methodology, organized by IQAC Gurgaon College in collaboration with Department of Economics, Mahapurush Simanta Shankardev Vishwavidyalaya. Well, we all are aware of the importance of research methodology in providing a scientifically sound knowledge base. Today, we have with us Dr. Prasenjit Chatterjee, sir, who will be delivering his insights on systematic literature review. Dr. Chatterjee is currently the Professor and Dean, Research and Consultancy in the MCKV Institute of Engineering, Kolkata. He has over 100 research papers in various international journals and peer-reviewed conferences. He has authored and edited more than 15 books on various topics. He has also received numerous awards, including the Best Track Paper Award, Outstanding Reviewer Award, Best Paper Award, Outstanding Researcher Award, and University Gold Medal. Dr. Chatterjee is the founder and leader editor of Smart and Intelligent Computing in Engineering, Smart Computing Applications, AAP Research Notes on Optimization and Decision Making, to name a few. So I, on behalf of the organizing committee, welcome you to today's session and to Gurgaon College, sir. And before I hand over the session to sir, I would draw the attention of all our participants that we are live on Zoom as well as on our YouTube page. And they can send their queries on the comment box of both the platforms, and the feedback link will be provided on both the platforms. So without much ado, I would like to hand over the session to you, sir. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, madam. Thank you so much for the nice introduction. So let me first share my PPT, then we will start. Okay. So is it visible to all of you?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. So basically, today's talk is on systematic literature review, and I will be also talking some portions related to systematic literature review and as well as on a particular software, okay, which is called Prisma. So let us move forward with this. So as we know that a literature review, so basically let us try to understand what a literature review is. So literature review means to introduce a topic where we can summarize the main issues and also we provide some illustrative examples. So this is, it means that in literature review, while writing a research paper, the literature review means to summarize the works that have already been done by the previous researchers, and we need to find some ideas for our future research work. So this is basically called literature review. Now let us try to understand what are the different topics that we can have in literature review. So basically, there can be different types of literature reviews, like the narrative literature review or the traditional review that we are accustomed with while writing a research paper. Now, the second term is called the systematic literature review, or simply we can call it systematic review. Then we have systematic mapping study. In some cases, it is also called as the scoping study. Then we have the meta-analysis, and apart from that, we also have a tertiary study, which is not that much applicable for engineering, science, or management disciplines. But in some cases, the tertiary review studies can also be helpful. So basically, there are 4 different types of literature review. So now, as I'm sure that all the participants must be knowing about the traditional review or the narrative review that we used to follow while writing an applied research paper or a standard research paper. So I'm not going to speak about the narrative or the traditional review. So rather, we'll be focusing more on this systematic literature review or systematic review system. So now let us try to understand the basic differences between the systematic literature review, then systematic mapping study or the scoping study, and the meta-analysis. Apart from it, we will also slightly discuss about the tertiary study. So basically, the systematic mapping study provides an overview and classification of the existing literature to identify the research gap. So this is basically called as the scoping study. That means we need to explore the scopes of the different papers that will be used for the review, so that we can easily identify some of the research gaps. And based on those research gaps, our research objectives can be framed. So this is basically called systematic mapping study or scoping study. Now, okay, when we come to the meta-analysis part, so in case of meta-analysis, some quantitatively summarization and estimation treatment or the relationship across multiple studies are basically explored. That means in the systematic literature review or in the mapping study, there are less applications of any statistical or mathematical models. But in case of meta-analysis, it is mostly related to the application of some statistical or quantitative tools or models, so that we can also explore the relationship between or across multiple studies. But in case of tertiary studies, no specific methodology is actually associated, and generally it refers to the third level in a sequence or a classification. So basically, when there is no particular strategy or particular methodology is associated with the review process, we can call them as tertiary studies. Now, apart from that, in the systematic, in the systematic mapping study or coping study, there are certain predefined criteria, or we can say there are some predefined parameters like publication type, research focus, and the study design. Similar to that, in case of meta-analysis, we also have some predefined criteria like the study design and who are the participants, the characteristics of the participants, and how to measure the outcome. That means the measurement of the outcome. So these are some of the predefined criteria that are extensively used in meta-analysis, right? Now, in case of the mapping study, we also extract some relevant data to create a structured overview of the literature. So this is the main objective of the scoping study. But in case of meta-analysis, again, we also extract relevant data. That means it can be related to the effect size, the sample size from individual studies or from individual papers. So in this way, the systematic mapping study or the scoping study, meta-analysis, and the tertiary studies are, can be differentiated. Now, when we come to our main focus, that means systematic literature review. Okay, I think the slides are visible to all of you.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, so now when we come to the systematic review system, so basically a systematic literature review is a rigorous and comprehensive approach to identify, to evaluate, and to synthesize existing research on a specific topic or research question. So the sole purpose in systematic review is to provide an unbiased and evidence-based summary of the available literature. So this is the main idea behind the systematic literature review, so that the research questions can be explored properly and by using a methodological aspect. So now, basically, individual studies contributing to a systematic review are called the primary studies. So in systematic review also, there can be two different types of review system. First one is called the primary reviews, where the individual studies contributing to a systematic review are considered, and a systematic review itself is a form of secondary study, right? So the systematic review can also be classified under two categories, the primary studies and the secondary studies. Now, so basically, so what is SLR? So it is a form of secondary study. So SLR can never be a primary study. So it is always considered to be a secondary study that uses a well-defined methodology to identify, to analyze, and to interpret all available evidences related to a specific research question. So as I said, it is basically an evidential research methodology, or we can say it is evidential literature review. And that is why it is called systematic literature review. Systematic means we need to follow, we need to adopt a structured methodology with the help of the evidences to explore the literature. That is why it is called systematic literature review. And it has basically three main features. First one is the research questions. Second one is called the research or the review protocol. That means the method through which the reviews will be done, based on which we need to explore the research questions, and we need to and the third one is we should try to find the answers of the previously raised questions. So these are the major features of systematic literature review. Now, why we need to do systematic literature review, or we can say why we need to do the literature review. So basically, as I was saying, that the main objective is to establish a connection or relationship between the existing knowledge and the problem to be solved in future. Because if we do not have any existing body, we cannot explore the body further. So for further exploration of something, we need something which already exists. So first, so that means the idea discovery. So idea discovery, that means when or how we can have the idea of some research. It can only come through a proper literature review. So from idea discovery, we can conduct the research. And once the research is conducted, we will have some findings in form of some outcomes. And when we have the research outcomes, we can easily publish it in form of different publications, like in a journal, in a conference, as a book chapter, or something else. So basically, you can understand the conduction of the research, the findings, and publishing. So these three phases are solely dependent on the first phase, which is called the knowledge discovery or idea discovery, which can only come from a systematic literature review. So to initiate any research, the first step is to go for literature review. Otherwise, we will not be able to frame our research question, we will not be able to frame our research objectives, and not only that, we may not be able to properly design our research methodology so that we can come to the conclusion part of our research. So in order to identify the research questions, in order to identify the research objectives, research gaps, as well as to structure or to formulate a research plan so that the research questions can be answered properly, so that we can eventually come to the conclusion part of our research, we need a very well-structured and well-thought plan for literature review, which is called nothing but systematic literature review. Okay, now, so now this systematic literature review basically has a dual purposes. First, it provides some benefits to the researchers or the individual authors, as well as for the society. It also provides some benefits to the entire research fraternity, that means the research community. So when we talk about the benefits that the authors can have, or we individual can have from a systematic literature review, it is increased readership, we can increase our citation, and eventually it can be helpful to increase and individuals H index. So these are the direct benefits of the authors. Now, when we come to the community or the entire society or research fraternity, so the entire community or society can also get some benefits from your systematic literature review. That means by someone's SLR, suppose you are performing an SLR for your research, and once you publish it, so being a reader, I can get a summary of evidences related to that particular topic from your research. So to understand the research topic, I may not be required to go through your entire thesis or thousands of paper. I can easily go through the systematic literature review part that was done by you. And from that, I can gain some ideas about that particular theme. That means what is going on, what is the trend, or what are the hot topics in that particular area, what type of researches have been done earlier, and what are the possibilities or what are the possible areas where future researches can be explored. So that can be a very or highly beneficial advantage that we can easily get from a systematic literature review. And now, as I was saying, that we'll also get to know about the current status, that means the state of the art situation of that particular topic. And it also helps us to decide in case of scientific conflict, because as we all know, the science, engineering, everything are basically full of conflicts. Because okay, whatever evidence I have for my research, someone can have an opposite evidence based on differential circumstances. So it becomes very complex. It becomes very critical for us to judge which section or which answer is the most appropriate one for a particular research question. So that means, but if you have a summary of evidences, so based on that, we can conclude, or we can get out, we can get from the conflict situation. So we can easily resolve the situation which has full of conflicts. And it can also help us to give the answers to several research questions, as I said, and obviously it helps us to explore potential research topic, right? So these are the potential benefits for the entire research community. Okay, so now when to do this SLR? Okay, am I audible, everyone? I think someone wrote that there is a network issue.
No, sir, you're audible.
Okay.
It's absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you. So now, basically, the systematic literature review can be done by anyone. There are some misconceptions that this systematic literature review is only for the master students or the PhD undergoing students, but it is not like that. Anyone at any stage can start a systematic literature review if she or he wants to explore newer research areas. Like say after having your master's or PhD in a particular area, when we need to expand our research boundaries, when we need to expand our research scopes or research areas, and when we aim to work on newer areas. So in those situations, anyone can start for a systematic literature review to gain those benefits, right? But yes, obviously, if a master student or a PhD scholar starts or undergoes a systematic literature review process for that topic, it will be immensely beneficial for them, so that they can easily frame their research objectives and questions that I was saying. Okay, now we need to know how we can do this particular SLR, or what is the systematic process of doing SLR. So basically, this systematic literature review process consists of several key steps, or we can say, several key aspects, like the research question formulation, then search strategy development, then study selection, then data extraction, then data synthesis, then research question, then the ideation of the review scope. That means to identify the review scope, whether we should go for review of 1,000 papers or 500 papers or only 50 papers. So there are different steps under this systematic literature review. And apart from this definition of research question or research conduction or the screening of the papers or the data extraction or mapping process, we also can have steps related to the quality assessment, then reporting and publication biasness analysis. So there are different key strategies or aspects in a systematic literature review. So in this particular slide, as you can see that I have basically shown here two different types of, but they are mostly similar definitions or the process flowcharts that were given by Peterson et al. In 2008. And the second one is given by Professor Hussain in 2018. So these two professors are very well-known researchers in the field of systematic literature review and particularly related to research methodology. So, so these are some of the steps but you can see that there are many similarities in this two graphs. So we will step by step explore all the different key aspects for performing systematic literature review. Okay, so this is the first step. So first we need to initially collect papers with broadly used terms. That means first we need to define some keywords so that the papers can be searched. The keywords must be related, must be thematically related to the research area, not in a very broader sense, and obviously not in a very narrow sense. So neither in a very narrow way nor in a very broader way. So the keyword selection is very important for any literature review or for any type of systematic literature review. So first we need to initially collect the papers based on the keywords. So the keywords can be finalized from the collected papers. And we need to list down some of the majorly or some of the keywords which have been repeatedly used in the different papers. And based on that, and after going through the papers, that relevant papers, we need to initially draft a set of questionnaire. So, so it is very crucial to formulate a clear research question and that defines the scopes of your review. Like the research question guides the entire SLR process, and it also helps us to determine the inclusion criteria for selecting relevant studies. So under these steps, we need to explore the search avenues. We need to explore the review scopes for our research. Now, once this step is finally over, then we need to determine the scopes of the review very carefully, right? So if the researcher is a master student, then he or she will have a very limited time, say of 6 months or 1 year. So the scope will become very narrow for a master student. But when the individual researcher is a PhD scholar, then he or she will have ample time to determine the scope, to refine the scopes. So, so in that case, the scope can be slightly broader as compared to a master students. So, okay, so now let us see. So these are the major steps. So first, we need to have some planning. Okay, planning about how to formulate the research question and how to develop the review protocol. So basically, under this planning stage, we need to frame a proper search strategy. We need to develop a proper search strategy because an effective search strategy involves identifying the relevant databases. That means the source of papers. So we need to identify the different relevant databases from where the papers have to be identified. So it can be Web of Science, it can be Scopus, it can be PubMed, but we always recommend for going for Scopus or Web of Science. Then selecting the appropriate keywords and applying the inclusion or exclusion criteria to obtain a comprehensive set of papers. That means the studies. So the techniques like, in the searching strategies, while you will be searching Scopus or Web of Science, the platform, then some Boolean operators and the truncation techniques can also be employed to refine the search, like the use of and, or. So this type of Boolean operators and some truncation techniques can also be adopted to refine your search problem. So basically, once you have the entire planning, so you can start searching the relevant literature. So this is basically the conduction process. So once you have planned for everything, the screening process, the selection criteria, once everything has been planned, then we can go for the actual performance. That means the conduction part, where first we will search for the relevant literature. And once the relevant literature has been searched, we need to perform very specific selection for the primary studies. And this study selection, that means in this particular step, studies are screened based on the predetermined inclusion and exclusion criteria. I will be showing how we can set the inclusion or exclusion criteria. That means which papers are to be included for SLR and which papers should be excluded from SLR. So I'll be showing some sample inclusion and exclusion criteria. So multiple reviewers assess the eligibility of each study independently to ensure the inter-rater reliability. So in this case, you need to perform multiple reviews, right? To assess the eligibility of each study. That means if the paper is actually relevant to your research or not. If it is not relevant, you need to exclude, because we do not have the time to go for studying the irrelevant papers. So this is very important. So once we have identified or shortlisted the set of papers or studies for the primary analysis, we need to perform the data extraction. Now, the relevant data from the selected studies are extracted using a predefined data extraction form. So we need to develop a data extraction form in this case. It involves extracting your key information like the study design, sample size, then intervention details, outcome measurements, and the major findings of those papers, so that you can list down in the form so that it can be used for your further analysis. So this is basically called the data extraction process. Now, once the data extraction process is completed, we need to go for data synthesis so that we can assess the quality of the studies, right? So the synthesized data from the included studies are analyzed and summarized. So for this data synthesis, various methods can be used, such as meta-analysis for quantitative data, then thematic analysis for qualitative data, or we can say we can also adopt a narrative synthesis for the mixed method studies. That means where we have a mixing of different types of, the qualitative as well as the quantitative information is there. So we can have a mixed set of narrative synthesis for the data, for the data synthesis or analysis process. Basically, the aim of this data synthesis is to identify the hidden patterns, the trends, and the relationship among the findings of the different studies. Because if you use, or if you have identified 50 papers so related to your research, so from that 50 papers we need to identify what pattern is there in that particular topic, what is the current research trend, and if there are some relationships between the findings or outcomes of these 50 papers, so that we need to analyze. So this is called the data synthesis process. Now, once the data synthesis process is done, then we can assess the quality of these studies or the papers. Now, the assessment of the quality of this paper is very vital to ensure, is very important to ensure the reliability and validity of the findings, right? So assessment of the quality of the of your downloaded papers or of your shortlisted papers is very essential, is very vital to ensure the reliability and validity of the findings. Because now why we need to perform the quality assessment of those papers? Because it helps us to identify any potential biasness, or if there are any potential limitations in the individual studies, and how those limitations can actually influence the overall strength of the evidences. So that is very important, because now, okay, there is a very wrong conception, or I mean, most of us do a very wrong step, take a wrong steps that okay, whenever we read any paper, we start with the abstract and then suddenly we come to the conclusion. To know what the paper is offering to us, that means what are the outcomes of the paper, but we never try to understand what are the limitations of that paper. Suppose if the researcher has developed a mathematical model to solve a real-time, say case study. So for a real-time case study, they have developed a mathematical model and they have solved it, and they have devised some conclusion with some managerial implications. But so these are their findings. But apart from the outcomes of the paper, we need to understand what limitations are there for that particular model. If the authors have assumed some restrictions, some assumptions regarding some mathematical parameters or something like that, so we need to understand the limitations of those models or methods, so that some other researchers can further develop that model, so that it can be globally acceptable for diverse range of problems or real-time applications. So this is very important, because once you know the limitation, your one research objective can come, right? Because if you can overcome that limitation, so you can have your research. So in this way, the outcomes and the limitations both are to be studied, right? So under this quality assessment phase, now we can have different tools or techniques or frameworks for the quality assessment. Like I will be explaining on, although like we have the Cochrane collaboration, then we have the Newcastle-Ottawa scale, or we have the Joanna Briggs appraisal tools. So there are different types of tools that can be used for the assessment of the papers or the studies quality. Now we need to conduct a synthesis of the evidences. Okay, so synthesis of the evidences means it is basically the summarizing of the entire thing that we have. And now in some cases, after the quality assessment phase and another sort of data synthesis or evidential synthesis can be performed with say a qualitative synthesis or it can be thematic synthesis. Like the thematic synthesis is basically an approach which is commonly used for qualitative researches, like in social science or in some management domains where less amount of mathematical models or applications are there. So it basically involves identifying and analyzing the recurrent themes and patterns across the studies. So, so this is basically the conducting or the conduction phase. And once we have performed all these analysis, so now we come to the reporting of the SLR and in form of a paper. So reporting all the findings regardless of its direction or significance. So it is very crucial in systematic literature review to maintain a transparency so that publication biasness can be avoided. Like, so publication biasness means we have seen that there may be some tendencies for studies with statistically significant results to be more likely published, while the studies with non-significancy or negative findings are less likely to be published by different journals. So this biasness can lead to an incomplete representation of the available evidences, and it can also distort the overall conclusion of the research. So we need to minimize the publication bias. So okay, how we can avoid or how we can minimize this publication bias? So these SLRs should strive to include the unpublished studies. We should also include the gray literature, or we can also include some ongoing researches. And additionally, we need to put some effort to search for the studies in multiple databases, like both in Scopus and Web of Science. In some cases, the PubMed or the Google Scholar indices can also be used so that an exhaustive review can be performed. That means the review should not be restricted to only highly reputed journals or something like that, because there are so many good papers in so many so-called non-reputed journals. So we should not be very biased towards any publication houses, towards any indexing houses, if we really want to explore the actual researches in that particular area. So in this way, so these are some of the major steps that are taken to perform the systematic literature review. Now, so you can see, so this is, if we classify these main phases, that means the planning and the conduction of the review and reporting and dissemination. So you can see I have just written down these steps in a more lucid way so that you can easily understand. So under planning, in a summary, we can say that under planning of review stage, we have to first identify the need of the review, why you want to go for systematic literature review for this particular topic. Okay, what is your objective? Why you want to do the review? Then you need to prepare for the review, and you need to develop the review protocol. That means the search strategy development. So this is very important to understand. Okay, which papers are to be included, which papers are to be excluded. That means the inclusion and exclusion criteria development is a major part related to the protocol development. Okay, now, so once these initial plannings are done, we can come to the stage 2. So under stage 2, so we have a distinct 5 steps, like identify the research problem, then study selection for the review, then quality assessment, data extraction and monitoring, and then finally data synthesis. And once we have the data synthesis outcomes, then we can write down the conclusions of the review with some future recommendations, and we can also implement the evidences for industry practices or for academic practices, and we can publish the results in form of a publication. So these are the simple steps that we can have in a systematic literature review. Okay, so now, so this now these in this table, so this table basically shows the research protocol that are commonly used for sorry systematic literature review. So first, research protocol means we need to fix a database. So as I was saying, the selection of the database is very important because if we do not select any particular database, we will not be able to identify the proper research papers. So as I was saying, that either we should go for the Scopus database, or we can go for Web of Science. So these are the two mostly recommended databases for research protocol development. But obviously, if if you do not have your individual subscription, or if your university or institute does not have the subscription in Scopus or Web of Science, so in that cases, you need to take the help of some other universities through a collaboration, individual collaboration, a personal collaboration, or if that is also not feasible, then we have the options of PubMed or a Google Scholar. But the Scopus and Web of Science are mostly recommended for performing any type of SLR or any type of literature review. And then you can set the language, because okay, while searching in Scopus or Web of Science, you will see that there are different papers which have been published in English. There are some papers which have been published in say some other foreign languages. It can be some in some regional languages. So so you can only include the papers which have been published in English, because it is not possible for us to read or to understand those languages which are not written in English. Apart from English, say the paper is written in some other languages, so it may not be possible for us to understand okay, those papers due to the language issue. So we can restrict to a particular language, and English is the vastly used languages, a language for other researchers. And now you can fix the time period. So the fixation of time period is very important. And we have seen that for the mostly for the literature reviews, if it is a narrative literature review, that means if it is a shorter, the shorter version of the literature review, which will be used as a part of a of an applied research paper. So in that cases, the literature review can be of say last 5 or 6 years. But if it is a systematic literature review, so at least we need to compile the papers from say at least over a decade. So in this way, we can fix the time period for the 2 decades. So it is based upon the number of papers that you can have. So so initially we can fix the time span for say 10 years. And if you get that the number of papers is not sufficient for performing a systematic literature review once the time period was framed for say 10 years, so in that case we can further increase the time period say for 15 years or 20 years, so that a good number of papers can be included for the systematic literature review. Then we can also develop the search field, that means the keywords or the article title or abstract. So in that case, we can use some, the Boolean characters, as I was saying, that and or options. So in those, in that way, we can put some restrictions for the searching fields. Now we are coming to the inclusion criteria and the exclusion criteria, which are very important part of the research protocol development. So now you can see that under the inclusion criteria, in this way we can give some restrictions, like the articles selected only if it is related to sustainability. If your research theme is sustainability or sustainable manufacturing or green manufacturing, so you can see, for example, I have given an example related to sustainable manufacturing or green manufacturing. So I will give a restriction that if the papers are only related to sustainable manufacturing or green manufacturing, then only it should be included, otherwise it should be excluded. Then the second inclusion criteria is the article should mention the use of keywords as mentioned in the search terms. That means either green manufacturing or sustainable manufacturing or MCDM or HP, top sales, demat. So these are some of the methods that are vastly used in sustainable or green manufacturing. So if my objective is related to searching of papers which have these keywords, so I will give a restriction to that. That means if the papers are having these keywords, then only list them, otherwise exclude them. And both the terms MCDM and sustainable manufacturing or green manufacturing should be used. So, I am interested to include those papers only where we can have both the papers. I mean both the keywords like MCDM and sustainable or green manufacturing. So in this way, we can set some inclusion criteria. Now we need to fix some exclusion criteria, like if the papers are not related to sustainable manufacturing, so those papers will be rejected. That means those papers should not be included for SLR. Then if the papers are editorial items, that means if the papers are short form of the papers in terms of a letter to the editors or something like that, if it is a conference paper, or if particularly if it is a paper review paper, but it has been published in a conference, so it is basically a conference review paper, then I am not interested to include it for my review. So I can give this type of exclusion criteria. And okay, when we will be opening the Scopus window, the Scopus platform, when you will log into that platform, at the left hand side we can see that this exclusion and inclusion criteria we can easily add to them, okay, by setting the time span, by setting these keywords or the application area. So it can only be done while we will be accessing the Scopus platform. Then a paper does not, if the paper does not mention the search terms used in those keywords, and if the paper only discusses about the future scopes, so in this way, so different exclusion criteria can be given as per your wish or as per your target. Okay, so the exclusion and inclusion criteria are very important to define or to restrict the irrelevant papers, so that irrelevant papers will not come into the searches. Otherwise, it will take a huge amount of effort and time to come to a short listing of the papers. So in this way, so we need to develop the research protocols and that can be used for your systematic literature review. So next, so this is a sample research flowchart, which is called basically a PRISMA flowchart or PRISMA guideline for article extraction and framework development. So now you can see in these cases, so this is basically a flowchart, and in your systematic literature review, it is mandatory to provide a similar type of flowchart in your paper or in your thesis. That means to systematically or to stepwise for explaining in a stepwise manner that how you have shortlisted this 50 or this 100 papers for your SLR. So how you came to this 100 papers finally, so that step has to be explained in form of a flowchart. That flowchart is basically called a PRISMA chart, and this type of chart can be automatically generated through a BiblioShiny link that I will be showing, or you can also visit the PRISMA official website for development of this type of charts, or it can also be manually drawn. But it is always recommended to use the BiblioShiny app or the PRISMA official website for development of this type of flowchart. So now you can see the first step starts with in the literature starts with the identification of the topic for systematic literature review. It means that first we need to identify a relevant topic for systematic literature review. Then after identification of the topic or area, we need to identify or we need to fix the database. That means, as I was saying, we need to fix the database like Scopus or Web of Science. Now, now say, okay, we have this online database called Scopus. That means all the searching will be done in the Scopus platform. Okay, now we need to fix upon the selection criteria. That means the keywords. So in my earlier slide, I have shown you how I have selected the keywords like sustainable manufacturing, green manufacturing, then MCDM means multi-criteria decision making, and so on, and all related to these methods. Okay, whatever have a good fit with your research theme. Then we need to have these journal research articles, conference papers, etc. That means for Scopus, where we can have ample of journal papers or Scopus papers. Now we need to apply the inclusion and exclusion criteria here. So if the papers are not related to the theme, so they will be excluded from this analysis. So this is, so you can see, so this is the inclusion criteria and this is the exclusion criteria. So if the journals or the conference papers are not related to sustainable manufacturing, it will be excluded. Like apart from that, if the editorial articles are there, conference review papers are there, and unpublished articles can be there, so we will not include. We do not want to include them to keep the number in a very practical way to keep the number, so we can exclude them for further analysis. Similarly, if the papers are related to MCDM or sustainable manufacturing, I want to keep all the papers. So if it is yes, then we will keep the papers, otherwise not. So in this way, we can come to the shortlisting of say 50 papers, 100 papers or 200 papers, depending upon the number of papers available for our research. And then we can start the systematic literature review with the help of the proposed framework that we did earlier. And then finally, we can find out the research implications, future research directions, and we can go for planning for publishing the paper in reputed journals. So this is basically a sample flowchart or the Prisma flowchart. Right now, okay, these are some of the papers which can be used as a guideline for SLR. So these are very important papers that you can follow how to conduct the systematic literature review. And in this paper, the detailed analysis of SLR, meta-analysis, thematic analysis have been performed with examples so that you can understand the entire process of doing the SLR. Okay, now under the planning phase of SLR, as I was saying, that we need to have only two responsibilities. First one is the formulation of the research question, and second one is the protocol development. So protocol development, so about protocol development, we have discussed enough. Now let us try to understand how we can formulate the research question, because it is the most important part in any SLR. It is not necessarily the same questions that you are going to address in your research, but it should be used to guide the searching process. So the research question here means it may not be directly related to your research objectives, but it is a set of questions that will act as a guiding source for your searching process or data analysis process. So you can see the formula for formulation of the research questions. You can follow the PICO approach. The PICO stands for the population, intervention, the comparison, outcomes, and the context. And so the PICO approach is vastly used for a formulation of the research questions. Okay, now let us see the example of the this PICO. So the first one is the population. That means to which theme or target theme is there. That means the target is the software or web-based project. So now you can see the title of the paper is cost versus within company estimation cost. Estimation studies, the systematic review. So the population, that means the theme of the subject is software or web project. Intervention means cross-company project effort estimation model, because the objective in the paper is to estimate the cross-company cost. So the cross-company project effort estimation or cost estimation. Comparison is with a single company project effort. Outcomes are the prediction or estimate of the accuracy, and there is no such particular context. So it can be none. Or if there are any particular context in terms of industry, like it can be a pharmaceutical industry, it can be a financial industry, it can be a fintech industry. So, the context means the type of industry that is being considered. So, in this way, the peacock approach can be used for development of the research question. Similarly, for this title, say empirical studies of peer programming for CS or SC teaching in higher education, a systematic literature review. Now, for this, you can understand the target population is the CS or the SC students in higher education. Intervention is, that means it is mostly related to the peer programming. The comparison is not applicable. Outcomes is, it is the peer programming's effectiveness. That means empirical studies of peer programming. That means it focuses on the effectiveness study of the peer programming. And the context is review all empirical studies of peer programming within the domain of CS or SC students in higher education. So the context is restricted for CS or SC students in higher education only. Okay, not for the broader domain of CS or SC student, but those students who are into higher education but related to the CE or SC domains. So in this way, we can jot it down. Now, so these are some of the examples of the research questions. And okay, the question number one can be like, what evidence is there that the cross-company estimation models are not significantly different from within company estimation models for predicting the effort of the software or web project? Like, so in this way, we can frame the research question. Or what characteristics of the study data sets and the data analysis methods used in the study affect the outcome of within and cross-company effort estimation models? Which experimental procedure is most appropriate for studies comparing within and cross-company estimation models? So in this way, different types of research questions can be framed based on the peacock method. Similarly, it is one more example what computer languages are being taught in introductory programming courses that make use of robots as teaching tools, because you can see the title of the paper was teaching novices programming using robots, a systematic literature review. So basically that review is particularly focused on teaching the novices, okay, the teaching of novice programming using robots. So what computer languages are being taught in introductory programming courses that make the use of robots as teaching tools? So this is your first research question that should be coming out into your mind. Now, research question 2, are the robots that are being used simulated or physical? That means whether the robots are actually existing or the robots are virtual in nature. That means if there are some simulation software through which the robots are taking the classes. That means the virtual classes or the physical classes. Then what are the characteristics of the novices being taught? Then what type of studies are being performed by the researchers that investigate the teaching of introductory programming concepts using robot? What type of studies are being performed? And do collected studies suggest that using robotics to teach introductory programming courses? So in this way, we can easily frame our research question so that after performing the SLR, we can have the answers of these questions, so that your conclusion, your future research direction, and the managerial implications can be properly written in form of the paper. Okay, so I have already discussed about this. So there are some tables that can be used in SLR, like the distribution of the papers based on, say, some application case studies, or we can also classify the papers based on some industrial case studies or industry classifications, or any particular application area in which the papers are mostly focused. So there can be different types of tables and figures we can also use in an SLR. Okay, so these are the inclusion and I mean the exclusion criteria related to the time period, investigation type, then design of the study, and so on. About the Prisma flow diagram, I have already explained. So this is the Prisma statement that can be used for, I mean, the SLR. And this is the sample chart that I have already shown how to develop this sample chart. So it will be basically related to your research protocol development. This Prisma flow diagram is basically a 27-item checklist and a flow diagram that guide the us in reporting the various aspects of our study. Right? It is also a sample of that. And there are certain systematic review tools that can be used for developing your research question, for generating your research design, like the JBI critical appraisal tools are there, AMSTA checklist is there, then the critical appraisal skill program, that means the CASP checklist, and the Cochrane handbook that I was talking about. So there are different types of tools and software like the Colander, then the Ryan, and then SRDS, systematic review and data repository. So these type of software and most of the software are open source software which are freely available. So you can use the software for extracting the data, for analyzing and for synthesizing the data. And also this software can be used for meta-analysis. Okay, that can also be incorporated into systematic literature review for a better understanding of the entire process. And these are the list, I mean the websites. Okay, these are the websites of the Prisma. The first website is related to the official website of the Prisma, where you can check the 27 item checklist that has been proposed in Prisma. And the second and the third link okay, they are related to the generation of the flow diagrams using a Shiny app, and that is available in the second link. And the third link is also related to the similar Shiny app, which is an alternative way to for your Prisma, I mean for generating your Prisma diagram. Now, but in case of Prisma, I would like to add one thing is that in addition to the checklist items that the Prisma has proposed, that means there are 27 checklists. So Prisma also includes this flow diagram that must depict the flow of your study throughout the review process from initial identification to your final conclusion. So only having a proper structured way of review is not sufficient. You need to express it in terms of Prisma flow diagram so that the reviewers or the readers will be able to understand easily what approaches you have adopted for your systematic literature review. And also by adhering to the Prisma guidelines, we can make it sure the transparency and reproducibility of our systematic reviews and the meta-analysis. Because Prisma enables the readers and the reviewers to evaluate the quality of our study and to assess the potential biasness, or if there are some limitations in your, in our systematic literature review. So this is very important, and we always recommend or suggest to combine the Prisma with other appropriate methodological guidelines like the Cochrane handbook for systematic reviews, or the MOOS for meta-analysis of, the observational studies to ensure a rigorous and comprehensive review methodology. With this, these are all about the systematic literature review and Prisma. So if you have any queries, you can ask me. Right? If there are any queries, the participants are free to ask.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Sir, this is Mrinal Ghosh, an assistant professor in the Department of Commerce, Gorga College.
Okay.
Sir, can you hear me properly?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sir, I have one very elementary, or you can say basic question.
Yes, please.
Hello.
I can hear you. Yes, please.
Sir, can you just yes, sir. Sir, can you just show us how to find out papers from Scopus online or Web of Science? How to extract or find out papers?
So currently, I do not have access Scopus from my laptop. I have institutional subscription, which I can access from my institute only.
Acha, sir. Okay, sir.
Right, but I am currently not at my institute. I am. We have the summer holidays, so I cannot show you
Yes,
how
sir.
to check the Scopus. But yes, once you have your Scopus login ID, you need to create a Scopus account there through your institutional access. And once you log in to your Scopus account, okay, there will be 3 different options like the search options. You can search by authors, you can search by the paper title, right? So obviously we'll search for the sources using the paper titles. So you need to click on the source option. Source means we will be searching through the titles or the keywords.
Okay, sir. Sir, you have mentioned about PubMed and Google Scholar also. Does this PubMed and the Google Scholar, they don't require any subscription for searching?
Oh, yes. The Google Scholar and PubMed are freely available. They do not need any subscription.
They are as much as reliable as Scopus and Web of Sciences?
No. As I have already said that we always recommend that Scopus and Web of Science are the 2 best databases for searching papers. But if in case we do not have subscription, neither we can have a feasibility of collaboration with other institutes or universities to get access for Scopus or Web of Science. So we are left only with the 2 options, PubMed or Google Scholar.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. If any more questions are there, I would request participants to kindly unmute themselves and ask the questions.
And one more thing, and that I want to include is that in case of systematic literature review, we always recommend to add bibliometric analysis, because this bibliometric analysis is a very vital part for say a review or for say a meta-analysis. So you can also go for bibliometric analysis so that some well-defined indices can also be explored related to the papers that you have collected. And also the science mapping or the relational mapping of different authors can also be explored through the bibliometric analysis. So that is also very important to understand, that it can also be clubbed with systematic literature review for a better understanding of the current situation. Sorry.
So I think we don't have any more queries right now.
Okay.
So if there are any, I would ask our participants to communicate with us, and shall definitely communicate it to sir again. So thank you, sir, for giving us your consent and for joining us today for this session. We are really thankful to you. Your session has enlightened us and our participants about the different types, importance, process, and steps of literature review, as well as about the different softwares and different approaches of how we can continue with a better literature review process. So thank you. I would
Thank you,
also
madam. Thank you
like
so
to
much.
express my heartfelt gratitude to our principal, sir, Dr. Sabyasachi Mohanto, sir, for always encouraging us in organizing such FDPs and programs. And last but not the least, I would express my heartfelt gratitude to all our participants for joining us today. And we shall meet again at 5:30 for the next session. So thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And thank you. Thank you so much.